this is Obscenity channel on education. What do we learn English for? What is the students' motivation when they enroll in a course or when they decide to request the services of an English teacher? What is behind their motivation? So we asked that question to many of our students, and the results were quite revealing. So 71% answered that they needed English to communicate at work and for professional purposes, followed by 40% for cultural interests, and 37% also wanted to just experience the pleasure of speaking it. And only 15% of the people that we asked admitted they wanted to certify their level. And still, when it comes to setting a learning objective, many times to get a certification is one of the objectives that students pursue. So that aligned with the necessity of providing competencies for academic or professional purposes conditioned learners a lot towards pursuing a certification. So today we're going to put exams under examination, and we're going to do it with Rob Wiley in Barcelona, Louis Morris here with me. We have Gracia Guzman in Madrid, Dan May as well with her, and Graham Bell in Malaga. My name is Radmila Burkova, so let's get started. First of all, guys, how did you like exams at school? Did you like them when you were at university or at school?
Not too much. I mean, I understand maybe you need to do them kind of as part of the course, but yeah, I got a little bit of stage fright from time to time.
I think for me, I always preferred exams to coursework because I was maybe not the most organised person, but I have a reasonably good memory. So exams tended to bring my grade up, but as a teacher, my opinions changed.
Okay, we'll hear it afterwards. What about you guys? Gracia, did you like exams?
I have a good memory, that, as Louis was saying, that's why I could pass the exams easily. But to be honest, I know that I have done many exams that just after finishing it, I didn't remember anything. It was just about, I will throw everything at the exam and then forget about it.
Yeah.
And that really annoyed me, because I remember that then when I went to England, for example, to do my master's, and things were different, I thought, oh, actually, I enjoy studying this way. Because all my life I was always just memorizing and throwing it into a bit of paper. It was not challenging enough, in my opinion, for me.
Yeah, I enjoyed exams at school because I was saying I can remember everything at the time, and I did pretty well in my GCSEs and other exams for the apprenticeship I did. But again, once the exam was finished, then slowly I started to get a lot of things which I done well in the exam. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I did enjoy it as a student.
As a student. Graham, what about you? As a student?
I think when I was younger, I was a little bigger picture of sacrificing that time to study to then get the exam result. I didn't do very well with exams at all. I don't think my short-term memory is that great. But practically learning, that's where if it's an exam like on-the-job training and an assessment kind of ongoing, I've always done really well. But those memory test things, no, I'm hopeless.
Yeah, yes, many students would say that they dislike exams, and yet they have to face them. And there is a demand for language exams and certifications. So why is that, Gracia? What can you explain about it?
Okay, well, so first of all, there is in Spain, it's all about papers. Yeah, we call it titulitis. So if you have a paper that says that you can do something, maybe nobody's going to check whether you can do it or not. So, and it's a business at the end of the day, you know. There are big companies, I'm not going to say all the names, but well, we all know Cambridge, Trinity, and so on. Those exams became very popular whenever a minimum level of English was required to get a degree or to get a job. So they saw the business opportunity, and now they have a very good business model there by just examining people over and over. My only thing about these exams is that I have interviewed people that said, oh, I have a C1. Or when I ask people, what's your level of English? I have a C1, I have a B2. Say, I don't care about that. You know, I want to speak to you in English. I remember perfectly once I was interviewing someone and say, "Oh, I have a B2." Oh, good. So you don't mind if I start speaking in English now? I asked her a question and she froze.
Exactly.
she couldn't.
That's the
She
real
couldn't
test.
answer. So
Exactly. So
That's a
Dan,
shame.
what do proficiency language tests and exams actually test?
They test in stages. They do like reading comprehension, grammar, things such as gap fills. Maybe they read this at least. But the problem is, I don't think it really tests your competence. Because you can train. It's like training and passing exams. So you kind of trick your way through and figure out little tips and start. An exam is something that you train for, in my opinion.
You memorize.
Memorize.
It's like a mechanic thing, isn't it?
And then I'd say maybe you pass the exam, it would be a short amount of time after the exam that you go out into the real world, especially with languages. And it might not help you. Like Gracia was saying, you need some people to have a certified C1 level, and then they tell you this, and then when you start speaking to them, it's a completely different point. So they pass this exam, manage to do very well through tricking it or through just drilling themselves with certain rules and grammar and reading comprehensions, maybe even scripted part of the exam.
So
I think it's harder. It's not really for competencies.
okay. So you're telling me that if I just study for the exam and I learn the certain techniques and tricks, no matter what my linguistic competence, I can still pass the exam. Is that what? Okay. So I guess that's what most of the academies ultimately do. They teach you or they tell you the tricks.
Absolutely.
They teach you how to pass the exam. They don't teach you how to speak.
Yeah, what they do is just do the same activities over and over and over again until you learn the mechanics of it and you memorize something.
Yeah, it's really
Even the
repetitive,
speaking
right?
exam, you know?
Yeah.
Grammar and gap fills and things like this, you can easily fill those out and then have a conversation, and it's not going to be a practicing conversation.
And Graham, can you share your experiences if you have any preparing students for exams?
Yeah, well, my experiences are quite strange. I mean, I did the TELTA education, so I got the opportunity to work with, like, in an examination house. So I got to see students in that setting. But the most experience I had was kind of doing favors for friends. When I first moved to Spain, I got so much help from Spanish people that I wanted to return the favor. So a lot of them were doing their B2, and some of them were doing their C1. And I can share an experience of a friend of mine who, when I first met him, he just sat the exam for B2. And in my opinion, he could hold perfectly proficient conversation with me. We're talking about music, holidays, all over the tenses. But he failed that B2 exam. And it blew my mind, you know, and it kind of made me realize that examinations and speaking are just completely different. I always relate it to the citizen exam that you do to join a country. I mean, I'm a British citizen, but I would fail without a doubt the British citizens exam. It doesn't represent the true culture of where I'm from.
Yeah, just on that point, actually, I coincidentally took that exam a couple of weeks ago, the little online test you could do, and yeah, I failed.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's interesting. So, Louis, what is the assessment system in England, for instance? Can you explain a little bit about it?
The assessment system in England?
Yes, and then we'll compare with Spain, because Gracia can afterwards explain about Spain.
In schools?
In schools.
So the way the system works in schools is that you start out with exams. It depends on the school and where you are in the country, but it can be from 4 or from 7. And then you'll have exams throughout your school education from 7 at least until 16. You sit your SATs, which is the standard exam for kids, and then your GCSEs when you're a teenager. And the problem for me, and when we were speaking yesterday for Gracia, who's worked in the UK system too, is that you notice that the children and the teachers are happiest and they learn best in years where exams are absent. So you have these years like year 6, which is equivalent of 10 or 11, and you notice the confidence of the students drop significantly, class enjoyment goes down, and teachers have to start teaching towards the exams. And we said exams are results-based, and Danny mentioned earlier just then that to teach someone to pass an exam is teaching them tricks. So the classroom becomes about tricks. You literally have 30 children in the classroom, and you're teaching them adverbials or adjuncts, and then maybe their connectives, and they just have to learn them by heart. So rather than having these children exercise their interest in the English language, like maybe writing stories, for example, they instead have to learn these constituent parts which are completely mean nothing to them. After that, the teachers can return to teaching normally, and I've actually had teachers say to me, now we can start real teaching again. So I think that the big problem with exams is that because it's orientated about passing the exam, the amount of pressure on the teacher and the school within the system, which I'll go into a little later, creates the problem there.
Would you say that the teachers enjoy more the learning process without exams?
Definitely. I mean, the teachers in the UK have, one of the biggest teachers' unions in the UK has threatened strikes on several occasions against the SATs, which is the primary school exams, mainly because they feel it affects the children's confidence, their ability to learn, and it actually produces worse quality students at the end of it because there's less quality of education and it becomes more about pushing it up. And it's not just that, it's from the teacher's perspective. It creates a lot more work and pressure because schools are under threat of privatisation if they have a very bad output and in the league tables, and then once the privatisation comes in, teachers' jobs are under threat. So I think it adds a lot of stress to teachers.
So there is kind of a political reality behind certain decisions.
Definitely.
Who
And I think
benefits
it's as
from
well
exams?
exclusive.
So, Gracia, sorry, you were saying?
I think that also these exams are exclusive because they don't include all levels, they don't include all the different abilities that our kids have. When I was a primary school teacher in England, I had kids they have dyslexia or other problems, so I would accommodate every activity I did in my class for them and for their ability. But then at the end of the year, they had to take the same test that a high-level student would take. And in my opinion, that's not fair because they are failing even before they start the exam. If you ask me to help a dyslexic kid with audio text, with the color of the text and things like that, and then you give them the same text in black and white with all the lines and without audio or anything, how are we helping those kids? How are we really measuring the reality of what they're learning?
It's true. It's one of the bigger problems. I think who benefits from having the exams? Well, if you're an elected representative, you want to show an increase in the educational ability in your time. So you want to push the exams up so that when the next election cycle comes in, you can say, look what we've achieved. So there's that problem, and there's that problem in everything in the public sector, I think. But also parents quite like exams, partly because it's tradition and parents did exams, so they want to see the same for their children. And I suppose that kind of summative assessment that happens at the end of the year allows them to see their children's progress in a way that is allowed in a classroom of the sizes that we have in the UK and that you have in Spain. Because when you have about 30 children, exams is probably the only way that you can assess them. I suppose it would require us to radically change our outlook with education. To remove exams, you have to have teachers who know their students well. And in the case of what Gracia just mentioned, generally in special schools, special education needs schools where you work with people who have heavy problems with dyslexia or other things like that, the classroom sizes are smaller to reflect that. Teacher needs to know them better. But I think actually all children deserve that type of bespoke education. It's not only for special needs education that it should be rolled out. It's expensive.
That's right.
I suppose. It's about business in the end too.
It's what Gracia mentioned at the very beginning. But in language teaching, we work with smaller groups. Therefore, is there another way of testing students' competence and progress? Because definitely from when I talk to teachers, they are amazed at how fast students progress. So how can we measure that progress without tests?
I think the way that we do it at Oxbridge is quite good. So if you know your students quite well, then you can see their progress. But then it's on the teacher to recognise when they've advanced enough to make the step to the next level. It needs the teacher to know that they have to take a proactive role. There's not going to be exams that come in to provide that natural shift. So it's on us to decide when a student demonstrates the ability. Often it's not about ability with language or with anything, it's about confidence. Suddenly the student's much more confident and you start to see their real ability, then maybe they're ready to be pushed up a level. But I think it's this idea that we need to continuously assess our students. You can't be lazy with it, but I think actually it's a better way to see students' progress.
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple of questions. The first one is from Peter, so it would be, if you prepare for one exam, will you do well in another type of exam? So for example, if you prepared for the Cambridge and then were to take a Trinity, for example, would you automatically do well in both? He said probably not. What do you guys think?
Exam.
I think you would struggle.
It's necessary to.
Yeah, I think.
I think that was also,
relevance in there. Yeah.
sorry, I'm not like.
Sorry, I'm
There. No, me too. I think there was a case in the UK where a number of professional historians took the GCSE level history exam. AJP Taylor and Eric Hobsbawm, two of the most prominent historians in the UK, failed the exam, which shows you it's not about what you know, it's about the exam that you're training for. So I think you would probably do badly, because if you're looking at past papers for Cambridge and applying it to Trinity, it would ask for a different number of things.
Yeah, and we have another question as well. So unless a company requires someone to pass a certain exam, do you think it's a worthwhile qualification to take? Still, I mean, if you take, for example, the Cambridge, would they want another exam? Would it be worthwhile forcing students to take one or the other? Graham?
What do you guys think? Graham, what do you think?
Sorry, I got half the question, but I think it's a choice between exams.
No, so
I think it.
well, go on. Sorry, yeah, go.
No, I was going to say, if it is a choice between exams, some of them they state your current proficiency. So it depends on which one you're choosing. You know, you have a Cambridge level pass at whatever level, and that's for a lifetime. Now, we all know that when you don't speak a language for a certain period of time, you completely lose those skills. I mean, I went home at Christmas time, came back, and I'd forgotten half the Spanish I knew. So it's the same with, if you do a Cambridge system, but likes of IELTS are kind of done every year, and you're going to hold you. So companies look for certain ones if they're looking for current proficiency. So that's the sort of choices you can make. I think that answers the question, I think.
It probably would suggest that you'd be less likely to do it now if you were going to need it in the future. Also, if companies know it's not about current proficiency, then probably advise that you do that exam closer to applying for the job.
Yeah.
Gracia, there is a certain one specific type of test, which is the APTIS test. Can you explain a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it's a test that it has recently become a bit popular. I've had a few friends that have to take it, and it comes from the British Council. And it seems that the different companies can customize it more towards the area or the field of work that they do. They test the speaking, the listening, the writing, and the reading, the four abilities, the four skills. But depending on their job and depending on the role of that person, they should take one of the others, or all the skills. But it's all about tailoring. They can change questions. They can tailor it to that area, their field of work. So apparently, it's supposed to be a bit more like a more realistic representation of the level of English that they need for that posting. It's not an exam that you can freely apply for, like for example at the Trinity or the Cambridge or anything. It's a company will have to ask you to take that exam, and that exam, that company will have said to the British Council what type of exam they want to.
So are the exams designed for each type of student, or is there like a set one for a certain type of work?
It's more. They are designed more towards that company, you know, and depending on the level. Also, have seen that there is an APTIS American. It's about American English. APTIS and British English. There is also for teens and for kids. I'm not that sure about how those work. I have seen as well APTIS for teachers, and that one for me was quite interesting because it's supposed to test the ability for you to communicate and to be able to work worldwide. So.
There are also exams for kids. I know that some big providers have them. But what's the necessity of testing linguistic competence in kids like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old? What is this for? What does that give them?
Camila, I think that in this, we are starting to put those kids in that business. You know, we are directing them there. It's again business. So now, yeah, money. So then they get the pets. They need to get the cats. Then they need to get the next one. So when they grow up, they have the need to continue taking the next one, because that's something that I have thought about many times. Some people do the B1, then they do the B2, then they do. Why? Because I think the whole point of taking a proficiency test is to test your ability as speaking a language. What do you have to track every single stage, every single development that you make, or the end one? I don't know. What do you think, Raim, in that way with the exams?
Yeah, well, it just reminds me of something my mum always said to me. My mum worked with challenging behaviour and younger, sort of kind of early teens. And she always said that those sort of assessments, you know, like that, are designed just so that classrooms can get bigger. Because it's impossible to formative and to work with students, but you can create the data that the governing body wants for its league tables and to keep parents happy by doing these assessments. But I think it takes away from your ability to actually teach. You know, you're spending so much time working about a strict criteria and you can't really get into it.
So, Rob, you wanted to go? You guys?
I think it also removes slightly the enjoyment of teaching. I think most people who go into teaching really like what they do in the classroom, but when you have a lot of paperwork outside of the classroom, you're preparing people for exams, and that adds on to the stress. I mean, Gracia was mentioning before that she interviews a lot of people who have the PGC, the teacher training qualification from the UK. And they come here to work in Spain as English teachers, where they'll receive maybe a third of the money that they could have got working in the UK. And we see that rate throughout, like 1 in 3 teachers stop teaching in the first 3 years after finishing their exams. And in the southeast of England, where rent and other things add to that problem, it's even more, it's close to a half. And we have in the UK a teachers' crisis now, especially in southeastern London, where they can't get enough teachers. So despite them putting the wages up and up, the quality of the job is going down and down from the teacher's perspective. And I do think it's something that we'd have to address, because larger classrooms, more exams, it takes all of the fun out of the job, actually, of course.
Definitely.
And I think as teachers as well, we face the same problem with students. Because when I was doing my Felter course, I finished it and my instructor said to me, Graham, there are a million small qualifications that you can go and achieve, but really you don't need any of them. You need experience of teaching those students. We have the same problems. There's a million different qualifications I can go and take to make me more specific as a teacher. Well, I'm a teacher and you're a learner. You don't need to jump through loopholes to show you can do it. It's experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we have another question for you guys from Maria. So she says, if the students are not in a career path that requires a specific Cambridge qualification, do you think another qualification could help them retain the language better? What do you guys think? Everyone's quiet as we're thinking.
It's hard to
sorry.
read on it, I think, though. Like, as far as talking, it's just teaching Oxford just because it's formative. That's the best way to figure out somebody's ability to speak a language, is being with them, speaking with them, teaching them, and being a monitor. I don't think that exams are something that finalise how good you are at a language, because you can always get better, you can always get worse.
I think
I couldn't agree with that anymore. For me, I'm a case. So I just generally don't see the purpose of them unless they're for an academic gain, a qualification. If you want to learn a language, just learn the language. And show people you can speak it. You don't need a qualification. If you get the interview, knock the socks off them. You know, you can do it.
retention doesn't come through exams.
I agree with you. It's like a language. At the end of the day, it's a skill that you develop, and it's something that you use to communicate. It's not something that it's like to put a title on your fridge, you know. It's not something that is live. You don't have to have a certificate for it, I think.
If you want to retain the language, go to spend 6 months or a year in the country where people speak that language. It's much better than any qualification you can take.
Absolutely. Maybe it's on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, immersive.
Absolutely.
Exam.
especially here in Spain. I mean, there are so many English speakers here. You don't even have to go and live in a foreign
No.
country. You know, I live in Malaga. You know, Fuengirola. It's pretty much 50% Diri. So there's plenty of opportunities to practice.
Yeah.
No, and also even just watching things in English, you know, there are plenty of opportunities, and just with lessons, with friends, you know,
You
it's,
have the motivation to learn.
yeah, you do.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And I think exams can demotivate.
Yeah,
Mm.
definitely.
So, I have no more questions here. I don't know, Gracia, you have any comments or anything to mention? I haven't got any more, so I don't know if we...
I think they are not. Maybe they
They're not,
don't hear us. So well.
We're struggling to hear you.
Okay, I can see that, but in any case, to conclude, what I can see is that teachers don't see the purpose in exams so much. Students they don't seem to measure real linguistic competencies. In our case, case of language learning, it takes away the fun from the classroom, and yet they're being a big marketing resource. So, well. Still, if you believe in teaching without exams and just in real learning the language as is, don't hesitate and join us at tuxinity.com. We will teach you how exactly you can become a great teacher without necessarily the objective being passing an exam. There is a fun way. See you guys. Many thanks, all of you, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Cheerio.